Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the Manager of Webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Today's webinar, Build Impressive IBM Web and Mobile Apps with No Programming, is sponsored by CNX Corporation. Today's featured speaker is Robert Swanson. Rob has worked as a developer on IBM I and its predecessors since 1992. Today, as a senior partner at CNX Corporation, Rob is a strong advocate for bringing modern desktop and mobile apps to IBM I shops, not only to increase user productivity, but to bolster the role of IBM I as a world-class application-serving platform. If you're looking to quickly create executive dashboards and query apps for both desktop browsers and mobile devices, complete with download to Excel capabilities, and do it all without writing a single line of code, you'll find this hour time well spent. With our introductions complete, Rob, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Well, thanks, Janine. So the topic for today's webinar is how you can create an IBM I web or mobile app without having to do any coding. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to use a tool included in the Valence Modernization Framework for IBM I. Now, as a quick intro to the whole framework, and before I get into the process of creating an app without coding, I want to point out that Valence is an IBM I-based development and runtime suite designed to handle all your modern business application needs on the IBM I platform. Valence runs natively through the integrated IBM I Apache server with the back-end web services written predominantly in RPG. Now, the framework requires no external servers. You just install it on your V6, R1, or higher IBM I system, point your browser to a specific URL, log in, and then you're off to the races. And at the end of this webinar, I'll point you to the web page you can go to download Valence to your own system and try it out yourself. And here are a few examples of what some of the core Valence apps look like, and we'll see more of these as we get deeper into the demonstration here. So the way Valence works is it operates as a single page or Web 2.0 style app in either your browser or on any Apple, iOS, or Android-based tablet or smartphone. And the UI is designed with an advanced JavaScript framework called EXTJS, which specializes in enterprise business applications. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, the user actions on the front end trigger calls to server-side web services that are typically written in RPG, though they can also be written in other languages such as PHP or Java. And all this follows a design methodology that's widely used on other platforms. So there's a huge pool of developers out there who are well-versed in this approach to building web and mobile apps. So the things included in the Valence framework include the EXTJS library along with the Valence portal for logging in, and an extensive RPG developer toolkit, which I'll touch on lightly in a moment. And these three things comprise the core of the framework, and much of it is actually open source. Now, in addition to that, we include a premium set of Nitro tools with Valence that handle everything from building apps to managing IBM I administrative tasks, to viewing and editing physical file data, to maintaining code in the IFS. And though I'll touch briefly on a few of these things in this webinar, my focus for most of it's going to be on Nitro Query, which developers or even super users with a solid knowledge of your IBM I database can use to very quickly whip out some pretty impressive apps in a matter of minutes. So let me take a moment now to talk about the secret sauce behind Valence's user interface. The visual components of the framework all come from an elaborate technical marvel called XJS. Now, you've probably heard of other JavaScript frameworks such as jQuery, Angular, React, Ember, Backbone, some of which are used extensively for social media or games or product catalog websites and so forth. But what distinguishes XJS or EXTJS is its concentrated focus on enterprise business applications. It's a complete framework devoted to all the UI elements you'd ever need in a business app. So there's no need for developers to go searching for separate plugins to achieve what they're looking for or anything like that. It all adheres to the all-inclusive nature that we're accustomed to in the IBM I world. Now, the framework is inherently cross-browser and cross-device compatible, so there's no need to fret about which interface the users are using, which allows the developers to focus on the data and the business logic behind the applications. And it's important to mention that this is a commercial product that's fully supported by the engineers at Sencha, which means there's a distinct chain of support responsibility that developers can follow when necessary. So here's some examples of some of the user interface components of an EXTJS-based app. Pretty much anything you can think of is available. It's all a matter of just executing API calls to build out these components. And it's pretty fun, actually, for developers once they sink their teeth into this and get this under their belt. Now, the Valence portal is the IBM I-centric piece of all this, through which users can log in with either their IBM I user and password, or they can use a special Valence-specific user and password depending on how you set it up. And then you can control how their sessions work, the library lists, what apps they're allowed to run, what RPG programs they can call, and so on. And I should mention that multilingual support is also built into the framework, so if your company has users in different countries, they have the option of logging into the portal in their native language and then seeing the apps accordingly. And the portal also supports multiple UI modes, as I mentioned before, so whether you're using a full-screen desktop browser or an iPad or an iPhone, the interface the user sees adopts accordingly, and the portal functions in the same manner. So this is an example of what the login screen might look at once you've installed Valence. Now, typically companies would customize that Valence logo at the top or put their own corporate themes, but this is the vanilla look, if you will. And then once they've logged in successfully, they'll get presented with a desktop launchpad. This is basically where you launch any apps that you need based on your authority. So if you're allowed to launch it, you'd see it. Otherwise, it wouldn't show up. Kind of like a green screen menu that's configured to the user's authority. And here's the equivalent on a mobile device on an iPhone 6. So it pretty much functions the same way. In this case, you just scroll up or down and launch the app from here. So just to give a better flavor for this, I'm going to go log into a live instance here of the Valence portal running on our test system. Okay, so now I'm logged into our test box here at CNX, and I can see my launch pad basically of all the different apps I'm allowed to run here. So I'll launch the portal administration app just to give you an idea of what that looks like. This is all the different apps that are showing up there. I could go into one of these and change the icon or change the users that are authorized to it and so forth. Lots of other things I could set in there. I won't get too deep in the weeds on that right now. Here's the Nitro file editor, which lets you basically type in the name of any physical file and or logical file, and you can edit the content. So here's a save view I've got, which is sorted by city, then state, then customer number. Probably would make more sense to put the state first, right? So we can move these around a little bit, but the point is it lets you kind of configure these columns to however you want, and you can go in and double-click on any one of these and edit the entries. Oops, don't want to remove it. I'll update it. So this is a nice little add-on for developers. Then I can save these views and come back to them later, or I could just type in the name of a file right here and go right into it and do what I need to do. Now all this is being served right on the built-in IBM I Apache server. So if I was to flip over into a green screen here, you can see, you can see it's all just sitting there serving up the calls. So pretty cool. AutoCode and Nitro Query are the two developer tools I'm going to come back to in a moment. Here's another one that's pretty fun, Nitro iAdmin. You can click on here and you can actually see the jobs that are running on the system. You can click on them and look at the call stack or the job log or the open files. Not much happening on this particular job, but maybe this one might be more interesting. Yeah, so there's the open files, and I like clicking on this active file so I can just see the ones it's churning on. In this case, it's not churning on anything. Here's the jobs that are on hold and so forth, and I can go into users and make them user enabled and so forth. That's also available as a mobile app. Spool file viewer is just another tool we've got out there to kind of let you click on the spool file and you can see what the data is and download it to a PDF and so forth. A lot of other things in here, but this just kind of gives you a quick overview of what's available in the portal. So, when you're ready to start rolling out web or mobile apps for your users with Valence, there are essentially three different approaches you can take, each method varying in the time it may require to complete the development, and the best method will typically be dependent on the result you're trying to achieve. So method one, which I'll be focusing on in this webinar, is to use one of the Nitro tools included in Valence, specifically Nitro Query or Nitro AutoCode. The speed of development using this wizard type of approach is super fast, it's very intuitive, and so no significant training is required. much anyone with a solid understanding of the underlying IBM I database can use it. This approach is particularly useful if you're developing inquiry apps or dashboards or file maintenance and other basic types of apps. Now, for more advanced development needs, method 2 entails getting your hands into the front-end code a bit more with a special IDE called Sencha Architect. Now, this tool allows you to fine-tune the UI code more, but of course you have to learn the ropes of both the tool and the underlying framework. And this can take a bit more time to master, but the end result is typically worth the investment. Just to give you a quick example of that, we have this test app down here. So this is a kind of a basic AutoCode generated file maintenance app. I can go in here and I can change some of the data. So if we were to look at the code behind the front end of this in Sencha Architect, this is what it would look like. And the code behind this grid is actually pretty elaborate. There's a lot to it, but it's a little easier to deal with it when you're doing it from a visual standpoint. So for instance, let's say I want to take this column and change its alignment. Well, I can click on it and I can go over here and search for that property, and I can actually change it to, let's make it centered. Then I can actually click on here and see the code, and I can see, oh, it added align : center to that. So it's a little easier, especially when you're getting started with the framework, to do things in a graphical manner when possible. So that's what Sencha Architect's all about. But that's really not the purpose of this video. We do have a video available on our website if you'd like to see more of that in detail, and I'll give you the URL for that at the end of this webinar. Now, method 3 is for advanced developers who want to create really elaborate apps and aren't afraid to do a deep dive into the JavaScript API calls to get there. Now, some developers actually use RDI with a special Eclipse-based plugin that's explicitly configured for working with the EXTJS framework. Other IDEs work just as well, but as you can imagine, it takes a bit more time to master this approach. However, once you do master it, the apps that are created are nothing short of astounding. I mean, pretty much every app that comes with Valence was developed in this manner. Now, for approaches 2 and 3, and in the case of AutoCode for approach 1, your backend or server-side business logic is typically written in RPG. And as I mentioned earlier, it could also be written in, say, PHP or Java. Now, these RPG programs are bound to a Valence service program that gives them access to the front-end user interface. And the service program is referred to as the Valence RPG Toolkit. Now, this provides all sorts of advanced functionality for RPG developers. I won't spend too much time on this here, but if you're interested, we have another separate video on our website that explains how all this works, and I'll give you that URL again at the end of the webinar. So, to recap the 3 approaches and their respective pros and cons, in the case of method 1, using Nitro Query or Nitro AutoCode, the pros include that it's fast and relatively easy. You can create and deploy an app within minutes of logging in, and it has a very intuitive design wizard that works right from within the browser. Of course, the big deal is that there's no coding required at all to get the job done, as you'll see in a moment. And it's very easy to upgrade the resulting apps as new framework features are released, and the apps automatically have a consistent look and feel for the users. The main cons of this approach is that because the development is driven through a wizard, it's not ideal for more elaborate, large-scale apps, and not every UI component in the XJS framework is available. For method 2, using Sencha Architect, the pros are that you're working with a drag-and-drop visual editor, and most of the framework UI components are available. The architect works with metadata so that minimal effort is required to upgrade from one release of the framework to another, and the amount of manual coding required is lower than in method 3. The main cons is that you have to install a tool on your machine. It does require some manual coding and new UI features that may not be supported right away as the framework is updated. And all the clicking around in the IDE can sometimes be a bit cumbersome, especially for advanced developers. Now finally, method 3 is the most advanced approach. It offers all the bells and whistles of the XJS framework. You can apply the most advanced MVC or MVVM application structures to your development, and you can utilize and extend many of the pre-written Valence packages you see in the various Valence apps. And it's easier to break apart large apps into separate components that individual developers can hammer on independently. Of course, this being the most advanced approach also means it carries the highest learning curve, and being deep in the weeds of the code like that can certainly slow down the development process until you've mastered that. So that's an overview of the approaches. Now let's zero in on method 1 in a little bit more detail. So Nitro AutoCode is actually a program generator. It literally writes front-end JavaScript source and writes and compiles a back-end RPG program based on a series of configurations or questions that you answer as a developer. You can even plug in a green screen query definition or an SQL statement if you wanted to instantly create a web-based inquiry app, complete with download to Excel capability if you wanted. A lot of users really like that. Now, we have a separate video dedicated to this tool, but just to give you a quick and dirty demo, let's return to the portal here and give it a quick spin. So I'll launch the AutoCode app. And you can see here it's putting me in the desktop file maintenance app. So it's going to create me a file maintenance app by default. I could also say, let's do a list inquiry app, and this is where I could actually put in a free-form SQL statement or import an IBM query. But we'll do a file maintenance app. So in this case, I'll just put in demo CMast, which is included with each Valence instance. And now you'll see it's asking me which columns I want to include on it. So I'll say let's include everything except the sales and the last activity date on the main grid. And then for searching, we'll say if the user types something in the search, it'll search just the customer name and the city. So then I hit next. Now it's saying, okay, when you're adding a new record, which fields you want to include, I'll say include everything except sales and last activity date. We'll let the RPG program initialize those on the back end. And when they're editing, we'll say they can see the customer, but they can't change it. And same for the sales and the last activity date. Okay. Now onto the configuration. Not a whole lot to do here. I'll just add this download option so the users that love Excel can download the main grid to their spreadsheet program. And we'll call this, we'll just call this webinar demo. I'll leave all the other defaults and let her rip. So now it's saying it put the front-end source in one location on the IFS, and the back-end RPG source is located here, and that's all configurable. I'll just hit OK and go back to the portal, and we'll see this. We should see this down here at the bottom. Of course, I could change that icon to something a little more interesting, but we'll let it roll like this. And here's the generated app. And of course, I can go on one of these and click on any one of these rows. You can see that I can't edit the customer number or the sales or activity date. Or if I wanted to add a record, I could do it like this. Maybe I want to search for a term, Chicago. This will bring back every instance of Chicago that it finds in either the city or the customer name as I configured. Anyway, that's in a nutshell how it works. And of course, you can then go and edit the RPG code to add some edit checks to these various fields. Or I might go into Architect and change the appearance or add some more buttons and stuff like that. So that's the idea behind AutoCode. Now, Nitro Query is a whole different animal. Unlike AutoCode, Query is intended to provide IBM developers and super users alike with tools for whipping out data-centric apps without any programming required. It's particularly well-suited to dashboard-type applications, as it utilizes the best factors of the XJS framework without requiring you to dig into the API code behind the UI components. Now, like AutoCode, grid data and apps created through Query can be downloaded to Excel. And also like AutoCode, and possibly unlike any other query tool out there, you can also create apps through Query that let users update data. So, there are three basic steps behind the process of creating an app through Nitro Query. The first step is to define where your data is coming from. A data source could be something simple like a product master listing or a customer master listing, or it could be something more elaborate like, say, your customer order detail file filtered on a particular status code and joined to the customer master to get the customer name and to the product master to get the product description. So it's as simple or as elaborate as you want it to be. Once you've defined one or more data sources, the next step is to set up a visual component or widget to render the data. Now, this could be a grid or a chart or a graph or whatever UI element is best suited to the corresponding data source. And finally, once you've created your desired widgets, the last step is to assemble them into an app that your users can launch. Now, the app might be a simple one consisting of a single widget like a grid, or it could contain multiple widgets that show or hide based on user actions. How you wire it up is up to you. So Let's take a look at the sample query app that comes bundled with the Valence framework. Now, you'll have this same app on your own system. Once you download Valence and install it, you can actually take a look at this same app and tinker with it yourself. So I'll launch it here, and we can see when it comes up that it's showing me basically a list of the top 5 customers for my fictitious company here, and then separately a grid listing a bunch of customers, looks like in the order of those who have the most orders. So I can page through this thing here, and there's an option to download it to Excel, and then I can also click on any one of these customer records, and it brings up a list of the corresponding orders. Now, all this was created through Nitro query without having to do any coding. All we had to do was define our data sources. I should also mention you can click on any of the components in this bar chart here, and we can get actual details for Heineken in this case. So, pretty neat. So what I want to do is flip back to the actual tool we use to define this and see how that works. So I'll go into the actual Nitro query tool itself, and we'll filter the list. At first it's showing me all my defined data sources and widgets. I'm going to say let's filter that to anything that has the word sample in it. So now we're just looking at the data sources and widgets behind our sample query app there. So if I click on this list widget here, we can see this widget is basically, there's a lot of columns available to it, but I'm only listing, looks like the first 5 columns, and that's what's showing here in this preview panel. So if I flip back to my sample query, I can see that corresponds to what we're seeing here, only it's filtered by that customer I clicked on. I can go to the properties, and I can take a look at different things I can configure for that. One popular one, of course, is to click on this download checkbox. That'll automatically open up a download option so users can have their spreadsheet data and play with it. I might also want to make it more user-friendly, so let the users move columns around. So if I check that box, then the users can actually take columns and move them in different areas, so forth. I can let them resize and hide columns as well. Lots of other different things we can configure. On the filters, we can actually say, okay, I want to let the user configure a filter on that data that they're seeing. So maybe, for example, maybe I want to say, let's let them filter the items in the list. And we'll say it's going to show up in a toolbar, and it's always in uppercase. So now I got an option for the user to type in an item code to filter this list below it. And I could also link that to another data source, so it would be like a list of products as well. A lot of different things you can do with that. So that's the widget view over this data source. So let's go look at the data source itself. It's a pretty simple data source. It's giving me the option to add another file to it. Right now it's mapped to the demo order file that's distributed with Valence. It's not joined anything. We've got all the columns selected. There's no filters on it. Sometimes you might want to filter your list by a status code or a country or something like that. It's ordered by the order date in descending order. And if I click this preview button here, I can see the data is rendered in a grid, so I can see all the data that's included in the data source. Of course, we're only including a subset of that in the widget itself. And I can see the JSON representation of that data coming back, JavaScript object notation, which of course is the language of these JavaScript frameworks. But this is all automatic for me, so I don't have to think too hard about it. If I go back, I can see the other part of our query app has the customer order count data source. Now this one's a little bit more elaborate. It's actually a customer master joined to an order file, right? So we can look and see that's joined based on customer number equals customer number. So the demo order customer number equals the demo CMAS customer. We're doing an inner join. I can see the columns that we've selected out of all the ones available. There's no filter. We're grouping by all of these because we're actually including a count. If we go back to the columns, you can see that we're including a count on the number of orders. The order by is basically by order number and descending, and the preview then for that data looks like this. So we can see here's our count field, and we're descending on that. And that's how we're able to put that into the query. Let's go back to that again. You can see how we have our top 5 customers and our top customers here. It's because that's the way the data source is set up. So let's go take another look at that widget definition. So if we take a look at the bar chart, for example, we can see that the bar chart, we've got our data field, which is the count, the total count, and our label field is the customer name. Now, I might pick a different, I could do customer number, but I think a customer name probably makes more sense. But in any case, you can see the difference that would do on your little preview panel here. And then we have a title and label title and series title. We're limiting it to the top 5, so if I wanted to make it the top 10, I might do something like that. Now give me the first 10 records out of it. Of course, it's a little harder to put the customer name down there, so that's probably why we want to leave it at 5. But lots of different things we can do. We could rotate the text if we didn't want it. If it couldn't fit horizontally, we could rotate it to a certain degree and make it more at an angle so it can fit more in there. I probably wouldn't want to do it upside down though. Lots of other different features we can do. I won't get too deep into that. We can also put filters on this just like we could on the grid. And the other element on that first screen is the grid widget. So again, that gives us this result. All that was done without any programming. But I think the best way to demonstrate that is not to start at the end and work backwards, but let's actually create our own app interactively right now and build on it. And you can see how quickly you can build out your own apps using your own data once you have Valence installed in your own system. So let's come back to this now, and we'll clear out our sample. We'll just go out and start creating our own data source. So we'll start by creating a data source over, let's say, the customer master file. So we'll use our favorite demo CMAST file here. I won't join any other files, so I'll hit next. And because I didn't join files, it advanced me past file joins to columns. So let's go ahead and select our columns here. We'll just pick all the ones we'd want to show in a grid, everything except that second address line. Hit next. Let's add a filter just for the heck of it. We'll take the sales. It's got to be only customers that have had more than $1,000 worth of sales. Okay. No grouping necessary. We'll order by customer number. And preview of our data looks good. So we'll go ahead and save this. So we'll call it the customer list. I'm going to give it a description of webinar so I can find it easier. And this third field here, if I wanted to, now obviously the emphasis of this webinar is how to create apps without any programming, but if I had an RPG program I wanted to call, maybe to crunch on some numbers and put the results into a work file, I could specify that RPG program here and it would be called automatically whenever this data source is used, so the users could always get the latest and greatest data. But I'll leave it blank for now. So if we constrain our list to just the webinar, we'll see there's our data source. So I'm going to go ahead and create a widget over that. Now for this widget, since I have a whole bunch of columns, it's most appropriately used with a grid. So I'm going to select the Valence View grid. But I should mention you could also do a Valence Edit grid, which would basically be a grid that you could configure so users can actually update data in the underlying data source. I'm not going to have time to do that in this webinar, but I encourage you to try downloading Valence and try this out on your own data sources. You can have a lot of fun with it. So I'll click Next, and now I'm going to configure the widget. So let's pick the columns we want to show. I think we'll just pretty much say show all of them. And we'll go to the properties, and let's see, we'll make it so the users can download to Excel because they always want that. And maybe let them move columns around on the table if they want. And we'll just save that like this. So right now I can tell already this is probably not going to render the best, but I just want to show what it looks like for starters. So we'll save this. We'll call it customer list. This is our widget now. Webinar. Okay. So now we've got our customer list data source and our customer list widget. So let's go over to queries now, and we'll create, I don't think we have anything in there yet for webinar, right? So we'll create a widget, or a query using that one widget. Webinar. So we'll pick our customer list webinar, it's in there, and we can give our app a title. We'll just call it, customers. And we'll just leave it like that. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And we'll call it, we'll just leave it customers. Maybe I'll put webinar on there just so we see that. And I'll leave the rest of it. So now if I go back to the Launchpad, I should see we have this customers webinar app created. So I can click on it, and we are presented with a list of customers. Not a very pretty list though, so let's go back and clean that up a little bit. We can make this look a little better so it's not truncating column headings, and we're using our space a little better. So if we call that widget back up, this is where we can go into the properties of the columns and do some magic. So you'll notice by default it's giving me some specific pixel widths for the different columns that are showing on that grid. But we also have the option of doing a flex width, which is basically any number less than 10 is just is a relative width of that column. And then the columns will automatically proportion themselves according to the width of the page or width of the browser screen. So why don't we do this? We'll say customer gets a factor of 1. The name will be 3 times that size, as will the address. City we'll say is 2. State is 1. 1. We'll say 2 for that, 1 for that. So now we can also do some other doctoring up on here. You can see it's reconfiguring a little bit there. Of course, this preview panel is kind of scrunched in, so you can't get a really true look at it yet. But I'm going to go ahead and do some other doctoring up of here. We'll make some abbreviations to fit the screen a little better. I'll say address line 1, and we'll say city, and we'll say state. Oops. A little fat finger here. Country. Zip code. We'll make this, we just put year-to-date sales, and we can take the date off of that. So now it's going to be making the column headings a little less large. You can always see how the proportional spacing is kind of going to work here, even in this small preview panel. And while we're here, let's also do another, we'll add some configuration, some renderers to this. We'll say this is US dollars, and we'll put a total on the grid. And for the date format, let's do the month, day, year format that the States likes to use. So take that ISO date. So that'll basically add a couple more features. Now we've got a total down here, and our date, although you can't see it here, is formatted. So let's save that and see the effect that that just had on the query that this widget's attached to. So if we go back and relaunch that app, now it looks a little cleaner. You can see the columns aren't truncated. The data's fitting inside the width of my window, all based on those flex settings. And now people can launch this app and get their data. But it's a lot of data. Well, maybe not a lot. It's 129 total customers. In this case, I have over 1,000. But what if we wanted to make it a little bit more user-friendly for the users? Let's say they wanted to be able to constrain the list by the country. So let's go back again. And this time, we'll call it the widget. And we're going to add a filter to that. So I'm going to click over here on filters. And we'll add a filter to, well, first of all, let's say where the filter is going to show. Let's say it shows in the toolbar up at the top, and we want to filter the country. So now we can see this is showing up there, customer address country. And we can actually make that a little cleaner by just saying country. That's the default coming from the final definition. And country code, it could be in upper or lowercase. We don't want to force it in the uppercase. And we'll leave it like that. So we can save this now. And if we come back and run the query again, or run the app that is, now we see that we can actually type the country in there and just see that. But what if they mistyped the country? What if they, didn't include, an E in Netherlands or something? It'd be a lot easier if we let the user select from a list, right? So we can do that as well. Let's go back again. And this time, we're going to create a data source again over the demo CMAS file, but this time we're going to use it just to constrain to a list of countries. So we'll go just pick the country column. We're going to group by that, so we just get one record per country, and we'll use that as our order by as well. So now we've got a data source that's just a whole bunch of different countries, so we can use that in our application. So we'll just call it customer countries. And now we can bring that into our data source, or into our widget. So we'll go back to the filter, and now we'll link it to that data source called customer countries. So that's the only thing we need to display. So now that it's linked, we'll see that we can pick from a list of countries when we're constraining our data. So let's save that. We'll go back and launch it again. And now if we want to just say, show me all the orders for the Netherlands, I can click that, and there's my list. And I can just quickly see there's $340,000 worth of sales there. So that's that. Now, let's see what else we can do to make our app more useful. So we've given them a grid with a download to Excel capability and a filter option. What if they want to actually drill in and see the orders on one of these guys? So let's go back again. And so now we're going to create a data source of customer orders. So demo order is our file name. And I'm going to join that with demo PMAS, the product master. These are all both included with Valence's demonstration files. And since I have two files now, I need to specify how they're joined. So I'm going to do an inner join between the product and the product master to the product or item on the customer order. Okay. Select our columns. So we'll take the order, status, let's say date, quantity, item, amount, and description from our product master. I guess using a measure would be useful too. Okay. No filters on this for now anyway. No grouping necessary, and we'll order it by order number. And here's our preview of the data. Looks good, just a bunch of orders, not constrained at this point. So save that data source. We'll call it customer orders. Okay, so now we have our customer orders data source. Let's create a grid widget over that. And again, we can do some formatting magic on here. First, we'll pick our columns, and we'll do the flex again. So order, status, date, quantity, item, amount, description, measure. Let's put these in a sequence that might make more sense. Probably want to put the item first, then the description, and probably put the unit of measure right after the order quantity. Okay, and we'll clean up some of these column headers. Be consistent, call it product number. Quantity, unit of measure, and we'll just call this a price. And do a quick formatting of the numeric data. We'll get that with money. And we'll format our date and the year format. And now, while we're at it, let's put, let's leave it at that for now. Okay, so we'll save that. It's our customer orders widget, mapped over our customer orders data source. So now we can throw this into our query and wire it up. So back to our query, and we're going to add a widget. So we'll take our customer orders widget. I'm going to click Add as Pop-up. And so now you'll notice there's another widget kind of appearing down here at the bottom. So we've got two widgets in our query, and now I need to link them together. So to do that, I'm going to click the Behaviors button here, and on the customer list, I'm going to add a row menu. And on that row menu, I'm going to add a button to filter a widget. And now it's prompting me to complete that. So I'm going to say the button's title is going to say List Orders. Actually, let's say Show Orders. I'm going to update the customer orders widget. I'm going to link them by customer number. So customer number to customer number. The title of the widget will change to, let's see, orders for, and I can put any combination of field names in here as a substitute value. So if I go back here, I can see I could use CNAME. That sounds like a good one to get the customer name. Okay, and then that's really all I need to do. So I'll save that, and I'll save that. Save the query. So now if we go back and launch it, so now you can see on our app we've got a row menu showing up here. And I can click on one of these and say Show Orders. And now we can see the brewing hardware that Heineken's been ordering. Okay, so that's an example of a grid widget drilling into another grid as a pop-up. But there's a lot of other widgets we can use with this tool. And since we're looking at a customer list, one of the characteristics of any customer master is the address, geocentric data. So let's go back and take a look at another fun widget. This time we'll go create another widget over the customer list, except that we'll do a map. So we'll select the map widget. Now all a map widget needs is address information. So you can see it's prompting me for address, city, and state, and I can just pull them right out of the list here. So address, city, state, and we can put country too. We can put a marker title. We can just throw the name on there. So I'll save that. We'll call this customer location. Now we'll go back to the query, and we'll add that widget to it. Customer location, not as a pop-up this time, so by default it's throwing it in the lower half, so I'm going to move it up. We'll just make it a part of the main grid, and we'll set some parameters on here. First of all, I'll say it's initially hidden and closable. We'll get some of the padding off there since we already have padding on the other widget. And let's link them up now. So on the behaviors, I'm going to add another row menu to filter another widget. This one will be show location, so it kind of complements show orders. This time we're updating the map widget, again linking by the customer number. And we'll just say, probably just put the name of the customer there. Okay. We'll save that. Save the query. Let's go see how that looks now. Now our main grid shows up and we have our same functionality as before. We can show the orders. Dismiss that. Now let's try showing the location. Now the map pops up and it shows us where we're located. Pretty handy. Okay, so in the time I have left, I'm going to demonstrate one more widget and another technique for linking them in. There's a lot of different ways to bring in the components to this query. And this time I'm going to go back and we'll create let's create a new data source of our top orders. demo CMAST again. If I can type right. And this time I'm just going to I'll pick the customer number, the customer name, and the sales. And I'm going to do an order by the sales descending. So this is going to give us a list of our top sales customers in descending sequence. So we can see there's our top one going on down. So now let's create a chart to render that information. So we'll say top customers. So we can create a widget over that. This time we'll do, let's do a column chart. And let's see, the data field will be the sales, and the label field will be the name of the customer. We'll throw a little padding on there. Let's limit it to just the top 5, for sake of example. There's other things we could do, but I think we'll leave it like this for now. So I'll save that. And this will be top customers chart. Charty. Okay, so let's bring that into our query. So I'll click on the query again. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a whole new section. So I'm going to click Add here in the App Sections. We'll call this chart. And in order to get to this chart, well, let's go ahead and put our widget in there. So we'll add our map, or not a map widget, our top customer chart. Now, in order to get to this chart, I'm going to go back to the Behaviors button, and I'm going to add an application level button. So I'm going to add a button, let's say Show Top 5. And when I click on this button, I want to show the top customers chart and hide anything else that's showing. So we'll hide that, and hide that. Now on the chart widget, I'm going to add let's add another button at the application level. I'm going to put a back button to dismiss that chart when it comes up. So when the back button is hit, I'm going to show the customer list again. These won't be showing anyways, but I will be hiding that. And I'll show this again. So save that. Let's go back to here. And we want to say when this is clicked, we're going to show that and hide itself. Likewise, this will hide when they click it. Okay, so I save that, and we'll save this. And finally, let's go back and see what it did. So now we've kind of created, I'm showing the back button. So the back needs to be initially hidden. So let me go back and fix that. I always forget to do something. Call it the Behaviors back initially hidden, so we don't see it initially. Okay, so now we'll go back to the app. Now we see a new Show Top 5 option in addition to our regular functionality. So if I click that now, it brings up our top 5. Then I can click back, and it goes away, and my regular functionality remains. Now, if we wanted to, we could also add a click action to that chart as a shortcut to get to the orders again. So let's go do that real quick. Come back into here, go into our chart, And on here, we're going to add a behavior of a chart click and a filter widget. And in that case, we're again going to show the customer orders, customer number to customer number. We can do our same thing. Save that. So now we just gave the users another shortcut to get to that same pop-up grid. So let's go see what that looks like. Now I'm here, I click my Show Top 5, and I can go click on this, and it brings up my orders list as well. So it's kind of an intuitive way for the users to get around the data in your system. And you can create all sorts of dashboards. You can even have them automatically updating throughout the day. You can set a refresh interval and just have it up on a screen in your lobby showing how much sales you've had for the day, and so forth. So lots of different things you can do, and again, all this just done through knowledge of their database, no programming required. Of course, there's a lot more you can do if you do know programming, and that's fodder for another webinar. You can even have RPG programs called and things like that. Oh, one other thing I should mention before we go is that these apps created through Nitro Query automatically reconfigure themselves for mobile devices. So if you were to launch this same app through on a smartphone or an iPad-like device, you'd see the same information presented in a mobile-friendly manner that makes optimal use of the screen space available. So for instance, this map widget, instead of trying to squeeze into the right half of the user's iPhone, it would instead pop up into the full screen, and then they could dismiss it to get back to the main list. So not a feature I can effectively demonstrate here, but something you can certainly check out on your own. So there you have it. It's the 1-2-3 process for creating some pretty nifty desktop browser and mobile apps on IBM I without having to do any programming. I'm going to wrap this up now by leaving you with some links for where you can get additional information about both the Valence framework as well as the Nitro Query tool I just demonstrated. Here's our main website where you can see all the details, and if you have any specific questions, you can feel free to email us here. On our videos page, you can see additional examples of Valence and the other Nitro tools in action. But most importantly, I invite everyone to go here to download Valence to their own system. You know, try it out and create some apps over your own company's data, and you can see all the things you can do, you know, for your users. And everything you saw me do here will work identically on your own system for 90 days. After that, you need a paid license key to continue using the premium Nitro tools. But you could still use the free open source features of Valence indefinitely. So I think we have a few minutes left for some Q&A, so for that, I will turn it back over to Janine.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And we do have some questions, so let's get started. Can users get to the created query apps directly, like through a URL or a browser bookmark?
Yeah. Everything I was doing in this webinar, I was basically running through the Valence portal. But every app that you launch, you can create a dedicated URL so that users can go right to it. And you can even set it up so they don't have to log in. As long as the app isn't showing anything sensitive or accessing data you wouldn't want a non-authorized user to see. So yeah, there's lots of ways to get these queries to come up in the browser.
Okay. Can a map widget show multiple address pegs at the same time?
Oh, yeah. So for example, if you had a bunch of ship-tos for an individual customer, you could conceivably have a map pop up with little pegs for every destination that customer has. Or if you had multiple, stops on a shipping route or something, you could have those all show. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with that mapping widget. All you have to do is show it how to get to the address, and it just automatically or like how we like to say, auto-magically places the peg in the right spot on the map.
Great. Okay. If I use an edit grid widget instead of a view grid, can I add edit checks to control what users key in, like from an RPG program?
Oh, yeah. So you can validate what the users are entering. Yeah, you can do some simple edit checks in the front end, or you can actually link. There's actually a site on our website that explains how you can create an RPG validation program to actually validate the data before it's accepted into the database. So, and if they misenter something, you can have it throw an error message back up into the panel. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. Here's one. How much does Valence cost to license?
Yes, the $1 million question. Way less than $1 million, though. Our pricing is very simple. It's $14,995, gets you unlimited users, unlimited developers on a single partition. If you have multiple partitions or disaster recovery boxes and stuff, we have steep discounts for additional installations. But that's our basic pricing scheme.
Okay, I'm going to have time to take one more, but please go ahead and do continue to ask your questions. Put them in the Q&A panel. If we don't get to it today, someone will reach out to you via email. So last question, Rob. Can Nitro Query be purchased separately from Valence?
We're working on that. We actually have the technical infrastructure in place so that it can be a standalone app. So yeah, there's definitely, if someone's interested in that, they can certainly email us. And they can also email us if they're interested in having us help them roll out a prototype or a proof of concept app. We work with a lot of prospective customers in helping, create, say, a mobile inventory control app or an order entry app to kind of demo to their bosses or to management to kind of show what all you can do with this framework. It's really very powerful.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and I especially want to thank you, Rob, for sharing your expertise with us today. Later this week, we'll be sending out a link to the recording of today's webinar to everyone who registered for the event. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day.